All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Thomas Marrone. I'm your host for this awesome Starships panel, a look at upcoming STO ships. And we'll go ahead and get started with everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you to Q Times for hosting this event. We're really excited to be a part of it to celebrate, the Day of Honor, all things Klingon, all things Star Trek. It's a lot of fun. It's amazing to see how many people have showed up for this. It's really great to be here with you all. So without further ado, let's get into some introductions. As I said, I'm Thomas Marrone. I'm the lead ship artist for Star Trek Online. I also manage our UI art team on the game, so I make the ships and buttons and things like that for STO. And I'll pass it off to Chris.
Okay, I'm Chris Thompson. I'm the brand manager for Eaglemoss Hero Collector. Essentially, I'm a professional pimp for everything we do, but that includes Star Trek and the Star Trek Online collection. And in terms of being on brand, I'm sitting here enjoying Klingon blood wine while we actually have our chat. So I've not imbibed yet, but here it is the evening, so it's okay.
And I'm John Ainsworth, development manager for Hero Collector, and I, amongst other things, look after all the Star Trek ships that we make, and I sort of see them through their whole development process to the point of sale, basically.
Awesome. And Hector?
So, yes, hello, this is Hector Ortiz. I'm senior concept architect at Cryptic Studios, and what I do is pretty much I make ships. People come with a ship that needs to be done, and we just sit and we make it happen.
It's a lot of fun to work with Hector. So and Hector actually designed the first ship I'm going to show really quick. Before we get into some of the more exciting things that we're going to be talking about today with some announcements for the Hero Collector Star Trek line, I did want to show off a couple photos by Niels Walter, who's a photographer that works with Eaglemoss. I said his name right? I wanted to, right, Chris?
Well, I think so, but I always know him as Niels Walter Kahn.
So okay, right. But he's done some amazing photographs of the Hero Collector models in general, and he sent me a couple of these photos as well. So here's the Chimera, this is the USS Gagarin. And then we've got the Chimera here, and I love what he does with these models, how he does the post-processing work and the lighting. It's fabulous. And I specifically wanted to show these to everyone because I have these models on my desk now, finally. We've been working on these, John, for about a year, right?
Yeah, yes, it is.
That's about how long it's taken to get these things from the original 3D model file to a physical model on my desk that I can, fly around, whoosh around. And that's going to partly what we're going to be talking about today is how that process goes. And I'm really excited to dive into that. John manages all that. He works with me. I give him the files, and he sort of waves his magic wand, and out pops, a year later, a physical model that we can put on our desk or fly around with our hand. So but John will kind of demystify that process for us today. But before we get to that, we are going to be talking about the next set of models in the STO collection. So I don't know if you want to take it away, Chris.
Yeah. So I guess just really quickly, coming back to Niels that you just saw on screen, to give him a plug, those are actually pictures of our actual ships, then obviously put into a fantasy scenario. He doesn't kind of have a little micro universe to photograph within, but he does an excellent job with those. And although we haven't put it out, there is a quietly self-published book that Niels has done, I think maybe 2 now, of his ship photography of our stuff. So it's quite impressive. So a big shout out to Niels. You can try and bug him online and get copies of them. But what I want to be doing is telling you about the next ships coming up, which is kind of interesting because I saw a thread on Reddit where someone was very cleverly guessing at or using detective work to figure out the next ones. And I guess I'm pleased to confirm that they were correct. Do we actually have them on slides, or am I just reading these out?
Yeah, I've got them right here.
So yeah, the USS Pathfinder is going to be number 7. So we're going to announce ships 7 through 10. Number 8 is a Dominion Vanguard was carrier. Ugh. Then number 9 is a USS Europa. Number 10 is the IKS. Now, how do we say this? We don't have the Klingon interpreter on here for us.
Moog. It's named after Worf's house, right? His original house in Moog.
Moog. It is Moog.
Yeah.
So that is 7 through 10, which won't officially get announced otherwise until we release our solicits over the next couple of months. But you kind of get a sneak glimpse at them here first.
And I thought I'd just show this off. This is a photo of everything in collection up through the Europa, I think. But they all look great together. I'm really excited to start amassing more starships for my dragon pile.
Yeah, essentially you need to own them all because they look better as a group.
Yeah, you get a little squadron there, and it's been fun with Star Trek Online. We've got over 600 ships in the game, and so it's been fun, but also super challenging to decide which ones are going to get the Eagle Moss treatment, right? And so there are a lot of things that I think about before pitching that to you, and then John, I know you and Ben have had feedback on what we wanted to do and when we wanted to do it, and so getting that mix has been a fun part of this whole project. But yeah, so let's go ahead and go on to kind of the thrust of what we're going to be talking about today. And it's really interesting. One of the differences of what we're doing with the Star Trek Online ships versus what Eagle Moss has done for and Hero Collector has done for other Star Trek ships is that we're the ones, the Star Trek Online collection are featuring ships that we have created ourselves. It's not, somebody else did this 30 years ago or for a movie or a TV show, and then you're doing archaeology to dig up reference on it. It's STO is, we make these ships. Some of these ships we only made in the last 2 or 3 years. When Discovery came on the air, some of the ships that we're making models of are relatively new to the Star Trek universe because we made them as a reinterpretation of Star Trek Discovery ships. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about that whole process, starting with how we make the ship for STO, and then we'll give it to you, John, to talk about how then that turns into an actual model that can sit on your desk. And so Hector is our concept artist, as we talked about before. And so really the whole process starts with him. There's a saying that artists have that nothing is more intimidating than a blank piece of paper. And that's why concept artists are so important and brave, is because they're the ones who tackle that piece of paper. And so right now we're looking at a bunch of sketches that Hector did for a Klingon battlecruiser, a light battlecruiser called the Kapu. This needed to be a smaller ship. It was going to be in a bundle with like a Miranda, USS Reliant kind of ship. So we wanted a Klingon equivalent that felt Klingon, but also had a new kind of factor of that you hadn't really seen before necessarily. We were always trying to iterate for Star Trek Online setting, which is in the 25th century. It's 30 years after Voyager. So Hector, can you talk about these sketches a little bit?
Absolutely. So usually it all starts with a problem. People come to me, Hector, we need something. Excuse me. So usually it's we have more of a need. We need a cruiser. We have it's gonna be this big. It's gonna have this capability. Sometimes the capabilities are not there, and we start informing each other. Sometimes I draw a cannon there, and design goes like, oh, we can use that cannon. Oh, no, you should remove it because then it's going to affect something else, blah, blah, blah. That's usually how it goes. In this case, to make this ship, it was kind of challenging because we wanted to create something new, but with some cues recognizable from the past. So instead of just jumping in and trying to reinvent the wheel, what I did was I did exactly the same process they used to do back in the day to create ships, which is take the ships that are done already, they chop it into pieces, and they start kit bashing. That's how they inform the initial ideas. So I took a bunch of Klingon ships already established, and we decided, okay, we like this this nasal with like maybe those two heads, and let's interlock. Let's start mixing and putting together parts. And then my job usually is like make these parts work together, like so it looks like a cohesive ship, and it doesn't look like a flying Frankenstein monster, because that's easy. If you're not careful, that's easy it's easy to happen. So you have to be careful that it looks like it belongs to the universe, where it comes from, but it's also new, and we have to do it many times.
Right.
And it gets more difficult by the day.
Right.
It gets more and more difficult. Yeah.
I mean, the more ships that we make, the more kind of corners we paint ourselves into, in a way, right?
Yes,
we sort of
exactly.
use up ideas, and Discovery. I mean, one thing that has been really nice about Discovery and Picard in that sense is they're expanding the vocabulary that we can work with. Like what is a Klingon ship means something a lot different now. That's a much broader scope than it used to. So so we've got these as initial sketches, and then you would kind of go in and refine it a bit. And so we have a closer look at sort of the direction that we honed into for this ship. And then can you talk about this stage where you build
Sure.
it out in 3D?
Yeah. So the thing is, usually I make my initial sketches like top down. I decide, usually I get a ship and I decide which of the views is the most important one. And usually it's the top view. So because Star Trek ships, people at office know how they look like. They kind of flat. They look like airplanes pretty much. They have wings and they have these engines on the side. So people know more or less how it's going to look from below or from the side. So I don't take that. I don't worry too much about making 3/4 views in the initial sketching phase. What we do, though, is we do a lot of iterations in 3D. So I just take that model, that little thumbnail that I did, and I start doing 3D iterations just like that. Because that way we can see every single angle of the ship. That's when we do a meeting. And then I got a bunch of people behind me, and I'm in my monitor, and people are start looking at the ship from every angle. And they're gonna be like, okay, let's see how does it look with the wings up? Let's move the wings up. No, it doesn't work. Let's put it down again. Let's grab another engine. Let's put this engine here. And that's the beauty of working in 3D. As soon as you have the idea figured out, at least the main shape, working on 3D allows you to do a lot of iterations rather quickly, like right there on the meeting, instead of come tomorrow. No, we can do it now.
Yeah, and since it's going to be a 3D object in the game, and that's the other thing is, when you're making something for a TV show or a movie, you sort of have exact control over how people are going to see that thing. So if you know, well, this ship is only going to be visible from this angle in this shot, and I've seen some of these models from Discovery or Picard, the actual, because CBS will send send us some of those assets, they don't finish the bottom. If you know you're only going to show the top, the bottom just won't be built. It doesn't exist. And so we don't have that luxury since we're making a 3D game where players can tilt the camera around and view every part of the ship. So we have to finish it out and really, think about all these angles and how it looks from every direction.
We have to remember that this is also for a video game. So some parts are going to be exaggerated. It's maybe the guns are going to be bigger. It's like Final Fantasy. You see the guy Cloud with the gigantic sword. There's a reason why that sword is gigantic. It has to be seen from far away. Where some details, some details in this ship are going to be exaggerated or reduced depending on what suits the game.
Right.
So that's why the steel ships have certain particular look. So it's easier to see from every angle, light casting, no light, or whatever.
Right.
So
and yeah, this is the final concept illustration for the Kepu light battlecruiser. And so, one of the things we always like to play with, because it does translate well to a video game specifically, is the lighting. So we might have more lighting or more windows than you might see on a regular, because it's easy for us to add light. I know on a practical model in a studio, it was a lot harder, right? That made the model more expensive and difficult to manage. But now that we're moved over into real-time rendering and the stuff they do for the shows, that doesn't matter anymore, well, necessarily. So we have a bit more of a free hand to do those kinds of details.
Yeah, and the windows and illumination on the ship they have to kind of delineate the ship's silhouette, no matter the situation, no matter. It can be against dark space, and you have to be able to at least recognize part of that ship. So we have to take many things into consideration.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Can I ask something quickly?
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys were talking about, kit bashing, and essentially that was what they did with the show, and so you could look at what had been done before. Are you more self-referential now in terms of when you kit bashing, it's actually pulling apart your own sort of designs and more working from them than, say, source material from TV or film?
It depends. It depends. It depends of what the occasion requires. Usually, it's funny because I go online. When I started working at Cryptic, I went to Google. I went Star Trek ships, for reference. And I had a lot of ships. Now I do it, and all I get is my ships. So we've done so many ships that I have a gigantic library of objects to draw from. So that way allows me to create certain direction that has been flowing for many years. I've been working in Cryptic for 5 years, a bit more than 5 years. So now but every time I do a ship, I do it according to a plan that I have in my head. And it has been a plan that has been developing for five years already. And it involves using my material. And every time I get into a corner, and then I start referencing stuff from the show. But usually I take it like, this is our stuff. And we're doing this for a game, but it's us first.
Yeah, and the setting of STO, as I mentioned, is in the 25th century. It's 10 years after Picard. And Picard didn't even exist when we started STO, right? So STO has been around itself for 10 years, since 2010. And so we've been building this language of the 25th century for that whole time. There's some false starts, but now we've got a really good lineage, like Hector said, and I know when I've gotten the chance to design a couple ships, and I know there have been times where I purposely will pull something from one of our other ships, in the same way that they did with like the Nebula and the Galaxy, to show that they're cohorts, right, that they're contemporaries at a point in history. So absolutely, we do that, when we can and when it makes sense to.
Yeah, it's whenever we need.
So I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but we'll talk. Just want to talk a little bit about the process of taking Hector's design and then making it into a 3D model. This model was created by Ian Richards. He's one of our ship artists on the game. He's been around for a long time. He's a great artist. He also does some of our visual effects for the game too. I love this ship. I love how it turned out. I think it's a great original design that feels very Klingon, but also offers something new to that lineage. So the process for modeling a game, you create a wireframe. People have probably seen wireframe images just in movies or watching any sort of behind the scenes thing on their DVD features or whatever. We create the wireframe model, then you apply textures to it, and then there's a whole host of other data things that you have to do to bring it to life in the game, to create sort of this virtual version of a starship. But here is I did want to share with everyone the sort of the finished model that shows up in Star Trek Online. So that's us. So that's how
us.
we have to concept something and realize it in a digital space. But I'm going to kick it over to John now to talk about the actual model. Now, we're not going to be talking about an STO model because John has some photos he brought of another model from the Eaglemoss collection but it goes all the way through the process.
Yay.
That's right. This is not a hero model I've chosen at all. In fact, it is a small shuttlecraft. I think it's worth talking. Say again, sorry, Chris?
It's a sneak peek, isn't it?
The sneak peek. This is it's a shuttlecraft for my a set of 4 shuttlecraft, which will be released in December this year. So, but I think before we actually get onto the model, it's worth saying about where we actually have our starting point from, because sometimes it's quite different. Because the object, of course, is to make our model, our physical model, as identical to what has been seen on screen or in the game in this case, as possible. And the best way to do that is to actually have the original 3D model, if that exists. And we're fortunate that for shows like Discovery and Enterprise and the latter half of Voyager and Star Trek Online, all the 3D sort of assets still exist, and we can actually use the actual models that we use in the show to adapt and to become the physical models. But if you go back earlier, you know, to Deep Space Nine, Next Gen, and the original series, where they were still using physical models, we have to create the 3D from scratch. And in some cases, there's very little to go on. So that's part of the reason I chose this particular model, which is a docking drone or shuttle drone, because we had some reference for it, and you can see very little on screen. So in fact, maybe Thomas, if you show the first slide, this is where it appeared, which its first appearance was in the Binar episode of Next Gen, and it went on to appear in about 3 other episodes of Next Gen. It was always meant to be a little ship in the background, so it's obviously not, it's not the big Enterprise that we're looking at. It's that tiny little ship in the left-hand corner of the left picture, and that tiny little ship that's approaching from the planet. So you really can't see it in detail, but they still had to create a model for it. And apparently this was quite last minute that they had to create this model, and so they had no money and no time, and Dan Curry created it. And if you actually go on to the next slide, Thomas, this is the model that Dan created, which is constructed from 2 Gillette razors and a broken foot of a robot, apparently.
Yeah. I see that.
I can see the razors. That's amazing. Oh, you can even see the Gillette logo.
The Gillette is there.
That's hilarious.
And so he did that really, really quickly. And of course, because it's in the background, you weren't going to go and see that. So we're very fortunate that, I mean, in some instances, we don't even have a physical model to use as a sort of basis. But here we had a picture from Dan that he sent. And so taking that, we give that to a 3D modeler, which in this case was a guy who does a lot of our models called Ed Giddings. And he would basically construct the 3D from that. And this is what he came up with ultimately. We actually went through a few stages before this. We usually wouldn't do this, but we did actually take some slight liberties. In fact, this is this is the earlier version. This is quite as close to the original model as possible, although we get rid of the Gillette logo.
I was about to say, I noticed the Gillette logo is no longer there.
I can't unsee, man.
And it's so frustrating because we often do like screen accurate versions, even with their mistakes. So I was really hoping we'd kept it.
Well, we felt with this one, and we were a little bit worried that, I mean, and this is the first version, he quite faithfully recreated the razor apart from the logo. We were a bit worried that it did too obviously look like 2 razors stuck on the side.
It was a close shave.
So we actually asked him to rejig the ends of the razors to make them look more like tractor beams, because it's a docking shuttle. So we really reasoned that, you know, it's there to sort of tow ships or push ships. So we did a few iterations of this. And as you can see, he had them pointing down there. And this is, I think, the final one we ended up with. And we settled on that. So it's a little bit of a variation from what technically was on screen, not that you could really see it. But that's what we ended up. And those little bits at the end do look like tractor beams. We know we've seen tractor emitters elsewhere in the show, and that was very much
right. Yeah, I recognize them from the.
Now it's functional.
And also the shutters on the, I think in his first version, he just had sort of black, where the windows are, he just had like black windows. But we wanted those sort of lines put in. And we asked him to put an access hatch on the back of the shuttle, which wasn't there originally in what he did first of all. I mean, the likelihood is this was perhaps an automated drone, but we wanted to suggest that it could be manned if necessary.
Right. Well, even automated drones, you probably have maintenance
exactly.
access and things like
you
that.
Get in to make repairs or whatever. So I think what minor modifications we made were sort of justified.
Yeah, for sure.
And we felt it sort of made it quite authentic. So that was sort of after like 3 or 4 passes back and forth with Ed, and we would end up with this. And this is his render. So having agreed the design, Ed then produces what's called an STL file, which stands for, and I've got it written down because I can't remember, stereolithography. And that STL file basically contains all the information that the factory needs to start the process of making the physical model. So that gets sent to the factory, and they produce this that you can see on the screen. This is called an ESON file, which is basically their version of the 3D. And as you can see, it shows how where the stand would be positioned, which varies greatly from model to model, particularly if they know it's going to be quite heavy at the front. You need to position
how would this lock into the stand?
This one doesn't lock. Actually, the shuttles just rest on these ones.
Oh, okay.
The online ships and a lot of the other ships actually sort of hook on, as I'm sure you're aware. So at this point, although the factory have taken the STL file, they're aware that it's actually going to be created, made into a physical model. And these shuttles in particular are actually quite small, the smallest size models we do. So sometimes it's necessary to do some slight simplifications, or there's some details that they can't always quite replicate. And in fact, if you see that on its left-hand side, in fact, is it possible to go back to the last slide, Thomas? Can we go backwards?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you see that sort of girder on its left-hand side, which is obviously like bars and things. So if you go back to the ESOM, it's actually slightly solid there. It's so tiny that it's not possible to sort of hollow out the gaps in between. So,
right.
So that, sometimes you have to make those slight simplifications. But otherwise, that's a fairly accurate representation. And we would have the chance, we would see this and we might query something. We might say, oh, can you improve that detail there? Or is it not possible to do this? So it's possible they would do a second version of this 3D before they then go on to produce the prototype, which is this. This is what comes back. This is the first time we get any kind of physical model from the factory, which they've produced from the ESON file. And this is, ideally, this should look exactly like what we've just seen in the 3D. We might at this stage think, oh, this could be a little bit better, or the detail could be a bit better here. So we can refine it before it goes on to the next stage production. But this is the last stage at which we can actually alter the actual physical model.
I was going to ask, like, how much do you sort of take for granted from this prototype? Oh, this will be better in the final version, because I'm seeing a lot of striations, the lines.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it's manufactured. It's just a bit of lightweight plastic, basically, so it's not going to be as precise.
Okay.
But it's enough to show you, excuse me, the details that you want to be there, or hope will be there.
Sure.
So this is the point where we would approve this and say, yeah, okay, that's fine. Proceed to the next stage, which is the first sample. But to do the first sample, the sample is going to be painted. So we produce a quite detailed paint gallery, as detailed as we possibly can, as you can see here. So we actually specify which color goes where, make it very clear what we want to be, which color.
Yeah, and this is something that I do for the STO ships when I ship them off to you. Is I take samples of the colors that we make in the game, and then Photoshop has a thing where it will just tell me the nearest Pantone color to the eyedropper color, so I can get that done.
I mean, with the online ships, it's a lot easier because it already exists in that sort of 3D form. I think we can replicate the colors very easily.
Yeah,
I mean, with some of these older ships, sometimes we had the model, so Ed would have based the colors for his renders on that physical model, and then we use the renders as a base. But it's always best to go back to looking at what it looks like on screen if you can, which is difficult in this instance, but
sure.
A lot of the other ships. And lighting plays such a huge part in this. Ships can look quite different on screen in terms of their color due to the way they've been lit, and then if you actually see the physical model, I mean, like the Discovery ships, it's really dark. Actually, the lighting in Discovery for all the ship stuff is quite dark, so it's quite a surprise when you actually discover, Discovery itself is quite copper colored and things like that.
Yeah, and we definitely have that problem even when we're recreating a ship for the game. because we have to, we have to decide, well, this is what it looked like in Discovery. This is what the model actually looked like. What do people want? Do they want they want to feel like it felt in the show, or do they want the sort of one-to-one accuracy of, well, this is how it was built? And Ben Robinson, I remember on a SDLV panel one time, said that at least for physical models, they would actually paint them a lot more saturated than they wanted them to be on the show, so they could pull that back in the video, like desaturate in the picture.
I mean, the Enterprise D is a good example. I mean, the actual model of that is really quite green or bluey green color, which and it perhaps on screen tends to look more silvery color.
Right.
I would my feeling is always to sort of go mainly with what it looks like on screen, but be aware that lighting has played a part in it. And it's always a little bit of a balancing act between the two. Sometimes easier than others. For sure. So yeah, we send off this paint guide, and this is the first sample that came back after giving the paint guide. And immediately when I saw this particular one, I just thought, oh, it all looks the same color. It's a bit too all one color, really. So it's extremely unusual for us to say that the first painted sample, that's it, we sign off on it and we're approved. It almost always has a second set of revisions, which you can see here. So the aim here, I think we changed the base color slightly on this one to the idea was it was slightly more gray, but we also wanted to pick out some of the individual elements a bit more, almost compensating for the shade because it's so sort of small. So you can see on those girder sections, because it isn't actually hollow, I just wanted to give a sense that it was. So the lines and the hatch on the back, we're just going to give a sort of sense of the slight sort of shadow you get from the raised ridges, perhaps. Right.
And that's just a miniature painting trick that a lot of people, even hobbyists who do D&D miniatures and stuff, will fake that kind of shading. To sell the scale of it.
Yeah, exactly. It is scale, and because these shuttle models are quite so small, you just want a little bit more definition on them. And the window shutters at the front, particularly, they should be a lot darker. So that's the stage where unfortunately I haven't got the second sample to show you because it hasn't come back yet. We're at that stage in the production. So hopefully the second sample is going to come back and we're going to be a lot happier with it. It's possible we do sometimes go as far as a third sample. It's unusual to go for more than that, because by that time you probably have honed it down to what it should be.
Sure. And usually you'll send, for the SDO collection, I've gotten to see some work in progress images from you, and usually they're pretty good because they're coming, they're starting with just this is how it looks in the game, reference, which I think makes your life a lot easier, right?
I think the online ships are in some ways my easiest things to work on.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
we have great source material, and we have your help and input, and if I have any query, I can just and you'll have that information to hand. So it's quite easy to get them right, I think.
And it's nice because it's all made up. We're not trying to figure out what people 30 years ago were thinking. I can just tell you what I was thinking or what Hector was thinking, and I don't have any qualms. Since we're the ones that are making up this canon, I don't have any qualms about making it up myself if there are any gaps we need to fill. And so that's a good transition actually to the magazine that also comes with these ships. So I think is one of my favorite parts about them is getting the insight into how they were designed, any lore behind the ship, any sort of related episodes, or Star Trek concepts that we do. So for the STO collection, I'm the one who actually I write the magazines. I do a preliminary layout and send that to you, John, and then you work with your graphic designer to finalize it.
That's right. Yeah, I love working on it because I'm unfortunately I can't play Star Trek Online because I'm a Mac-based person, and so it's not available to me. But so I'm finding out stuff by reading the magazine, which I love actually, and I love the fact we have all this. You often go into the sort of the background information of the story that's happening in the universe and the various wars and conflicts that have been going on. Which I think
Yeah,
is brilliant.
Hey, thanks. I mean, STO has 10 years of game lore to pull from, and even that, we had lore that we started with to leading up to the timeline of STO, because there's a gap between Star Trek Nemesis, which was the latest show or latest movie after before Picard came around, to the beginning of STO. So I just have a few images in here of the process of working on the magazine, which is writing it, obviously, and sometimes I'll make notes and I need to edit and come up with the passages I have to excise because it's too long or need to add in too short. And then I'll go through and collect a bunch of art that I think I might use in the magazine. And this, there might be characters or compositions, screenshots, all that stuff. And I'm not quite sure when I get started how it's going to work, but just having a lot to pick from, helps the process out. And then it goes into the layout. So do you want to talk a bit about the 3 sections we've got in each of these magazines, John?
Yeah, sure. Although you're probably more qualified than I am. I mean, the idea is, of course, I think we started as a starting point was the format of our magazines for the existing Star Trek ships. So the beginning section tends to be a sort of profile of the ship, more in universe, really, about it and what part it played. And we also get to show the plan views of the ship, explaining which bits do what, basically. And then we have designing it, which you always seem to manage to find a huge amount of information to say, which is great.
Yeah, it's nice. Hector and our previous concept artists generally have we have a shared drive that just has all of the concept art pretty much for the whole game in one place. So it's usually easy to find, the images that I need. Actually, the next magazine I have to make, I have nothing for, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
I don't want to know that.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'll come up with something.
I hope so.
I'll come up with something. Don't worry about it. But it's usually we do have a great a reservoir of stuff to do, and either I can just ask Hector, or in a lot of cases, even if I wasn't on the ship team back when the ship was made, I remember hovering around the conversations and remembering what people were doing, what they were trying to do, all that. So it's STO's been around for 10 years. I've been working on the game myself for about 9.5 of those 10 years. So I've been present for most everything except the pre-production of the game, which means I have a good knowledge base to go from. And then the last section of the magazine that we've got is just a general STO lore article. It is usually tied to the ship. So in this case, for the IKS Bortasqu, this is Captain Corrin is the captain of Bortasqu. She's actually Worf's, in STO's lore, she's actually Worf's stepdaughter. So she's the daughter of Grilka, who in STO lore ended up marrying Worf. And so it was fun to kind of make up some lore about her, dive into that character a bit, because Star Trek Online, usually the player is the hero, not any one of these other Star Trek characters. It's fun to see them and interact with them, but really it's about the player's journey. So there isn't a ton that we go into these characters in the game. What we call them non-player characters or NPCs. So using this magazine as a chance to flesh out the lore for the ships, but also the lore for the characters, has been a lot of fun for me. And then this is just a nice shot of the cover there of the Bortasqu issue, which I wanted to feature because, of course, this is the Day of Honor, and the Bortasqu is the Klingon flagship in Star Trek Online. So yeah, I don't know if you all had anything else you wanted to talk about. I think we're getting close to our announcement that Chris, I know, is itching to make.
Yeah. I guess there was only one thing I wanted to point out, and I think you'd sort of covered it, but I'd meant to say something as well, is John is that guy who's doing all the work behind the scenes that people don't normally see. So, he's he doesn't usually come to shows with us, I guess, because he's keeping the ships running on time and making sure that they're all still coming out.
Yeah.
So people would be used to seeing Ben, as you'd mentioned, or in more recent times me. But yeah, John is this guy that lives with his stuff. So doing a panel like this, it's kind of cool to have him here to actually, talk about the process and this nitty gritty. You don't get this at a show. So it's quite a special panel that you pulled together here.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I hope people have enjoyed learning a bit more about the process and how we put it together. I've always been really impressed every time I learn about how we do something, just in the games industry. How solving a problem usually takes 5 or 6 people thinking really, really hard about it, and then usually the first solution you come up with doesn't work because somebody tried had this other consequence that nobody had realized would happen. So video games are complicated, and I know what you all do. Turning these into real models for people to enjoy has its own set of complications and requirements. And the timeline here, if you want to talk about that, John, about how long does it take from when you start on, when I give you a model from the game, how long does it take to see it come to life?
It is near enough a year. I mean, it's slightly under. It's 10, 11 months, something like that. But yeah, the various, I sort of rattled through them there, but the gap between, say, the prototype and the first sample is several months, basically. I mean, because the factory has to create a tool. We often manufacture the ships in pairs because all 2 ships go in one tool, basically. Which is the mold for which all the multiple different versions of the model are made. So that's quite a process in itself, which I must admit, I'm sure there's a whole detail there that I don't really know about. That sort of happens. I just wait and it gets sent. But so yeah, it is. And of course, there's a lot of ships in production process all the time. There's all at different stages. So it's about sort of juggling all of them at the same time, really.
Yeah, and also that kind of brings up a question, Hector. Now that we know that some of our ships are going to be made into models, is that something you think about now that we're designing new? We are designing new ships all the time too.
Absolutely. That really affects the ships with hanging bits. Now we have to reconsider that, like floating engines. That's a no for the moment, because if we do a ship that really depends of looking good because it has a lot of hanging stuff, man, that's why what was the name of the bump, the bump cruiser, the big one?
Are you talking about the Iconian stuff?
The Iconian ones, everybody's let's do that. Yeah, but you're gonna get like a collection of bits, and that requires another set of transparent things, right, I guess, to keep them hanging.
I would actually love to get Eaglemoss to do some Iconian ships.
Oh my god,
that's a whole. That would be a whole thing. Figuring out
that's gonna be
I'm sure Chris and John, you probably haven't seen them, but essentially they are, the classic magic sci-fi trope of a lot of spears and things that are just sort of floating together, right? And you don't know how they're not attached physically at all. So but they look really cool, and Iconians are the big evil bad guys of Star Trek Online, so I'd love to get them into the collection someday, but that's a whole,
a lot of clear plastic holding them.
Clear plastic, a lot of clear plastic. Yeah.
And you have to do that in a way that still looks good, because people can still see it, right? Like you have to figure out a way to engineer it so it doesn't ruin the lines of the model. You don't just want clear plastic rods connecting them that totally
they had to work.
Kill the illusion. So
we'll cross that bridge.
Not as much clear plastic as the Cloak Defiant, though.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, but it affects, it changes. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead, and I'm going to kick it over to Chris for one more thing.
Oh, yes. Okay. So now you've set this up so the slide essentially says the one more thing, but
right.
We've revealed up to ship 10, and I don't know if we ever officially confirmed it. I think Ben probably spoiled it on Twitter and said that we were doing 10 at some point. But we can spoil it to another level today and say,
There it goes.
10 more things. There's going to be 10 more ships. So we've revealed 1 through 10 in one form or another. You've got 7 to 10 today. There will be 11 to 20. And I know that someone's already been guessing at what number 11 is. And Thomas, I think you're going to tease what one of the other ones amongst the second 10 will be.
Yeah, I don't know exactly which number this is. I think it's kind of midway in there somewhere, but 11 through 20 will contain the USS Enterprise. We have already done a Hero Collector model of the Enterprise F from Star Trek Online. That was kind of our issue 0, I guess you might call it, because it's not part of this collection, but I think in some cases it was used to measure, would there be interest, and there was, which made me really happy, because this has been a lifelong dream of mine to get, not lifelong, but at least as long as I've been working on Stowe, on ships for Stowe. I love the Eagle Moss stuff that they, all these models, they're really well put together. They're at a great price point. And seeing them as a big collection at conventions, and even in our office, we have a couple cabinets just full of Eagle Moss models.
Absolutely.
And it's fantastic. So I always had ambition, like if we could get STO ships as Eagle Moss, as Hero Collector models, that would feel like we made it. So so I've been really excited getting the Enterprise F, the original Enterprise F, designed by Adam Eiley. Was a highlight of my career and my time working on the ship team for Stowe. But I also wanted to do the refit Enterprise F. I mentioned the Iconians actually a few minutes ago. There's a great big story arc in Star Trek Online where the Iconians return. They're from tens of thousands of years in the past, and they come back and they're really upset with everyone and cause a giant galactic war. And in the course of that war, the Enterprise, of course, gets heavily damaged and has to undergo a refit. And that was our little nod to the tradition of having the hero ship get refreshed, partway through a Star Trek movie series or a TV series or whatever. So so that was a really long-winded way of saying the Yorktown-class Enterprise refit will be coming to the Hero Collection, which I'm really excited about. That the Enterprise will be an issue in that series.
Well, and the cool thing is, the regular collection of the smaller starships is coming to an end. So you've got 180 of them, and it's perfect timing for people to jump across to the STO collection now and jump on board with them because they've just launched. You've got the first 2 available. And for those people who are going, well, gee, I wish, you'd gone from 180 up to 200 in this size. It's like, well, guess what? With these 20, essentially, that's going to give you the 200 in these size. So you just need to sort of switch across. And if you haven't started playing yet, jump on board. I didn't mention, I think I'm one of the people on the team that actually does play the game. Certainly, not for the last 10 years, so I've missed a lot. But I kind of jump in with different campaigns, and I always enjoy doing that. I'm kind of a gamer, so the fact I can get it on my Xbox is brilliant.
Yeah, it's great, and we should mention that every one of these Hero Collector ships from the STO collection comes with a 50% off coupon for a T6 ship in the Star Trek Online store. So that's a really good deal considering the ships in the game are about $30, and then that's about how much these these models cost. So if you buy one, you sort of get the other half off, which is really nice. That's on top of the awesome model and the lore magazine and everything. So if you enjoy Star Trek, if you enjoy Star Trek ships, even if you don't play STO, I've done my best to make all the lore stuff feel like it's reporting on the Star Trek universe. There isn't a ton of inside baseball that you have to know about the lore, the game mechanics, or anything, or that. Everything is presented in a way that if you're a Star Trek fan, you should have fun with it. So I hope that people who just enjoy Star Trek ships, regardless whether or not if they play the game, could find something to really like out of this collection. But yeah, I guess I'll give everybody a chance. I think we're coming up on time. We want to make sure the next panel has time to get set up and everything. This has been a ton of fun, though. I always enjoy
Yeah,
shooting
absolutely.
the ship, as I say. But if you all, if there's any place on Twitter or anything that people can follow you all, if you want to give yourselves a shout out, feel free. John, why don't we go to you?
I'm not really a Twitter person, but I was going to say maybe we should say where you can buy the ships.
Yeah,
Chris?
please. Yeah.
Where do we go? Where do we send people?
So you can get them from specialty retail, from comic shops, from shop.eaglemoss.com. There's so many options. I know that Star Trek Online have been promoting that there is a discount code as well for getting 10% off. I want to say it's ST Online 10 is the code, but go and double check that, before you try and use it. But I believe that's the one. So you get 10% off with us direct in the Eagle Moss shop. So shop.eaglemoss.com. And if you're wanting to follow us, and find out more about what we're doing as Hero Collector, it is so it's at Hero Collector _. That's what we are on Twitter and on Instagram. So you can check out what we're doing. If you want to see me rave about other things, not just work, I'm at Pop Culture Hound. Yeah, on all those things as well.
Nice. Hector, you share some of your art on ArtStation and Twitter, right?
Yes.
Where can people find you?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, usually you can find my new stuff at Twitter at Sandman979. You can find my stuff there. Yeah.
Awesome.
I do stuff for Star Trek and Magic every now and then.
Yeah, Hector's got a few Magic cards that he's probably more than a few now that he's painted as well. And I'm at Thomas the Cat on Twitter, or if you just want to follow me for Star Trek Online stuff, it's at cryptic_TTC. I usually will tweet out. I have fun. I upload links to my ArtStation where I upload 3D models of ships that I made for Stowe, so people can look at the models in 3D, zoom in and out and stuff, and that's people usually enjoy that. So this has been a real pleasure. Happy Day of Honor, everyone. This was a ton of fun, and thank you so much for joining us. We've had a great presence in chat. I'm kind of blown away by how many people have been watching us today so far. And coming up next, I believe it's the Blood of the Void panel with Eric Campbell, but the screen will tell us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for having us.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.